a live Q&A with Teneale Duncker from Hato Hone St John in New Zealand. My name is Mojca Bizjak-Mikic, and I am the Interim Chief Executive at the Council of Ambulance Authorities, and I am honored to be your host for this webinar today. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet today. For those of us here in Adelaide, it's the lands of the Kaurna people, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander, Maori, or Motu Koita peoples joining us today. We are really thrilled to have another big number of registrants today joining us today, so thank you so much for your time. With over 20 years of experience in the healthcare industry, Teneale has built a career rooted in service, leadership, and operational excellence. With a background spanning ambulance communications, disability services, and support coordination, she has held key roles including operations and center managers. Teneale is passionate about improving systems, supporting frontline teams, and delivering quality care to the people who need it most. And throughout her career, she's led high-performing teams, managed complex service environments, and driven improvements in both efficiency and patient outcomes. Today's presentation shares Teneale's journey of becoming a senior leader in the sector while balancing motherhood, pursuing her dream role, and applying for it during maternity leave. We hope you find her story as engaging as we did. Before we begin, a couple of quick reminders. The video you're about to watch was recorded at the 2024 CAA Women in Leadership Symposium. So it's a recording. So we'll go from a bit of live to recording and then back to live. So after the recording, we're going to invite Teneale for a live Q&A. So I'm going to ask you to drop any questions that you might have that might pop up during the presentation into the chat, which is on your right-hand side. So we can see that. We'll be monitoring that throughout the presentation. And also, once we start the live Q&A, you can drop your questions there as well. Now, also before the webinar concludes, we're going to have a quick short survey, and we'd love for you to hear, to give us your thoughts on future topics and how you found it today. Thank you so much for being here today with us, and enjoy the recording, and we'll see you very shortly then after for the live Q&A. Thanks.
Thank you, Janet. So our next speaker is going to join us from Hato Hone St John's, Teneale Duncker. Teneale Duncker has over 20 years of service. Teneale could be found participating in community service by providing first aid support at local sporting events. It was here where she was inspired to pursue a career in the ambulance service. In 2006, Teneale's dream came true when she successfully commenced her career as an emergency call handler, and with the rest, and as you say, the rest is history. Today, Teneale is the Ambulance Communications Manager for Auckland Communications Centre. Teneale can be described as an approachable, value-based leader, empowering people to be the best version of themselves. Teneale is an advocate for women, empathetic to the challenges women face, particularly as working mothers in the ambulance service. Outside of work, Teneale and her husband, along with their 7-year-old son and 3-year-old girl-boy twins, set out to experience what this world has to offer and focus on making memories and living their best life. If you'd please welcome Teneale.
Thank you very much. So, tēnā koutou katoa ko Teneale Duncker tōku ingoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. Here in New Zealand, we would do a traditional Māori introduction. So that's me saying greetings to you all and welcome and thank you for having me here. As Lindsay's kindly alluded to, my name's Teneale and I'm obviously the Ambulance Communications Manager as per the picture up there before. Now, when I first set out to talk about this and I met to think about what would we talk about, it was a bit of a, I had an idea in my head, and then after today and what we've seen so far, it's going to be a bit of a mishmash because I think there's a number of things to focus on, but it's very difficult being close to the end of the agenda, so next time I'll put you up there for the front. So just really quickly, I'd like to share with you a little bit about my journey in ambulance communications, but striking the balance of being a working mother in a senior leadership position. Before we dive right into the history of what's led me to be here, I think it's important to take a bit of a step back in time and share with you where my journey's begun. And I'll pick up on some points that Claire and Erica have talked to earlier and about being vulnerable and mentioning that. So I've decided that my presentation on the screen is purely going to be pictures, and I'll call out a few people that are there. Now, hopefully this works. Okay, I first joined Hato Hone St John as a youth cadet at about the age of 6, and I was invited to a Bring a Friend night, and this is where I went along to the division posted here on the page. And before I knew it, was attending regularly and working towards badges within the curriculum. What started out as a fun activity and something to do after school soon influenced my life and inspired me to work towards a career in the ambulance service. It was at about the age of 11 when my dream of becoming a paramedic came to fruition. I spent many hours on public duty, and during a local rugby game, we witnessed firsthand the benefits of immediate CPR and knowing the address, which I hope somebody knows that for in here, should we have to call for an ambulance. After the referee of the game had a cardiac arrest, and he was resuscitated sideline and lived to tell the tale. Our youth program became a bit of a family affair when my sisters and I were old enough to join. They also joined the organisation. Sorry, bear with. I'll just click through all these people. The youth program became a family affair. My sisters were also able to join, and soon after my parents joined and accepted volunteer roles within the program. Most of our weekends were spent out and about at competitions or training for competitions, lots of that up there, attending badge camps, local fundraising activities and public duty. Hato Hone St John Youth also offers opportunities to grow and develop leadership skills as early as a preteen. And during my teenage years, I became a ranked NCO, and then in 2003 was named Northern Region Cadet of the Year. This is a role that saw me travel the countryside, representing the region, organisation, at many community events, planning and hosting different activities for our tamariki, stakeholder engagement with many a presentation about what was our program and what did it have to offer for young people, alongside being the youth voice at the table of executive leadership, where the voice was heard and understood. During this role, I met many inspiring children, men and women who have influenced my life both professionally and personally. Now, I was thinking about it when I was pulling this together, and I thought I'd tell you a little story about one gentleman and one female that have probably impacted me significantly. So when I was probably in my 20s, I also held a role of being an area youth manager for our local youth divisions, and I met a young boy there who was about 7 at the time. And this young boy had had a really difficult childhood. He was actually living in a facility where they were trying to place him for adoption, essentially. And one of his school teachers happened to be a youth leader within our program, and so he was brought to division. Unfortunately, because of his upbringing and what had happened, he wasn't quite familiar with how things should work and what should happen. And so we spent a lot of extra time, trying to help him in what it was that we were doing within the organisation and having a place where he could belong or something that he could connect to, because he didn't have that in a family capacity. And so after one sort of fun activity, when the end of the year activities came about, we went to mini golf, and the teacher that would go with him was like the teacher aide in there to look after him, and she wasn't very well, so she was like, Teneale, do you want to walk around with him and play mini golf? I was like, sweet as, no worries, let's go for a walk. Come on to this little gentleman, come around with me. At the end of the night, he was ecstatic, so excited, first time he'd ever been to mini golf. And about 3 years later, I got a phone call asking if I'd adopt him. So I obviously didn't adopt him, but I think of that young gentleman often And I think about how difficult his life was, but how impactful people can, the impact that just an organisation can have on somebody in that community stuff that we've already been talking about. So that little boy remains in my heart very dearly. Sorry for getting emotional. And he really probably influences my life and the type of mother that I want to be when I think about him. The other person that sits strong and top of mind for me at oftentimes is Lady Blundell. Now, Peter will know her very well, just as much as many of the other people in our organisation do, and what an incredible woman, and such a privilege to have met her and spend so much time with her. Somebody that was real and authentic and really shaped people's lives significantly, even right up into her late 90s, so moving. So anyway, think about them. After completing high school, I opted to join the workforce while I figured out what I would do and what would be the best pathway for me to follow in the hope of one day becoming a paramedic. I began working for a medical insurance company as an audit clerk, and in late 2005 applied to be emergency call handler. It was a very robust recruitment process, one that I was questioned significantly about my age and whether I would have the ability to be able to perform the role, but was fortunate to secure a position and set to start in early 2006. Moving into ambulance communications, having already been an active volunteer within the organisation, was a huge culture shock. Although not intentional, here is where I experienced inequity amongst the workforce of an organisation for the very first time. For the most part, the communications centre was full of men, nearly 90% of them in leadership positions, and a handful of women. And to be fair, probably at a guess, all of them were about the same age as my parents. So, being young, I felt pressured to prove that I was worthy of the role, capable of supporting my community in their time of need, and that I was far from a young female who was just an ambulance chaser. We use that term in New Zealand, or was used in New Zealand, to describe a young person that wanted to become a paramedic that wasn't going to follow the university pathway. After a year of call handling, I moved into dispatch, where ambulance ride-alongs were part of your training. Now here's where I figured and discovered being a paramedic was never going to work out for me. Cannot handle vomit. So a long-term career in ambulance communications was the way forward. And I thought about the big long-term goal. What did that look like? What would that now be, having come to the realisation that I wasn't going to become a paramedic? I thought, one day, if at all possible, when I'm all growing up, bearing in mind I'm in my early 20s, being the centre manager, I'll put it on the list. In 2014, I was lucky enough to move into a position as one of 4 duty centre managers. However, in 2016, I fell pregnant with my first son, and my parental leave was full of mixed emotions, an absolute internal struggle, not knowing what to do and what I was going to do when my parental leave ended. I absolutely loved my job, and I really wanted to be at home with my son. And as my husband also worked shift work, it really made things difficult. If you can figure out where to find a babysitter at 3 a.m, still trying to answer that question. I ended up resigning from my full-time role, and I moved into a casual position. And although this was the best decision for my family and I was heartbroken. It took me a long time to come to terms with the decision and try and figure out what next. Who was I without this role that was busy and constant and a something? After about 1.5 years, I craved a life that I once had known before, something that felt familiar. This led me to returning to Hato Hone St John full-time and my son beginning daycare. Nothing quite prepared me for that. For those of you in the room that have been through this journey, it's an unsettling period for both you and child and their spouse and other persons involved. And I experienced mum guilt to the next level for leaving my son and wanting to go to work, wanting to connect with adults, wanting to feel useful, wanting something that was more tangible than, what order should I do my housework today? It took a while to adjust, but we got there in the end. Now, fast forward to 2020, where my husband and I decided that it was the right time to try and complete our family and have another baby. At our first scan, we were surprised to discover that we were going to become parents to multiples. In 2021, our twins were born, and as my parental leave came to an end, this time it felt different. It felt different because for those of you that are either a twin, I know there's one in the room, a twin, or those that are parents of multiples, you'll know that when you go out in public or you're in a supermarket or you're somewhere, you're an instant tourist attraction. Everybody wants to know your details. And my husband, my mum, my siblings and I, when we were out with the twins, encountered something that I was fully not prepared for. I've been vulnerable, not willingly, in having people ask me questions. I've been asked, how did you get them? Where did they come from? Much to my husband's disgust and all opportunity, I directed that question to him and said, babe, they're interested on, what happens in our life. So I left that to my husband. And I guess still to this day, we get a lot of attention, or the children get a lot of attention, and they're very clued up as to what being a twin means. But I tell you what, I had a new outlook on life after having twins. I felt that I could survive anything that could come my way. I survived the newborn early stage, the interrupted sleep, the constant crying, the whatever that looks like, navigating the supermarket, even just getting out of the house with two babies, that tiny little one that yet is not able to walk themselves. That's an art in its own. And making sure that you had all the right things. So in summary about multiples, what I'd say is it's a different kettle of fish. So I'm fortunate to say that I've had a long career in the ambulance communications, and I now know that each role that was the right role for me at that time in my career. Applying for the ambulance communications manager role was a complete leap of faith. One of those statements that was on the board earlier. Here I was on parental leave, expecting to return to my role after 12 months off. And let's be fair, I was hoping for a holiday because I'd worked really hard for 12 months with twins. And I received notification of the advertisement for a role. And I decided, now's the time to give this a shot. Why not attempt to the something that was on my list once upon a time? One might ask, why then? I mean, in all fairness, from the outside looking in, my life was already chaotic enough. The answer to the question, and this has come up today, why not? I had nothing to lose. The challenges of being a working mother are real. A Pew Research Centre study shows that around half of working parents feel they don't give 100% at work. But despite this, around 8 in 10 working mothers feel that working is what's best for them. I'm often asked, how do you do it? How do you cope? How do you manage the pressure of your role as a senior leader and being a mother with young children and working full-time? In my mind, the answer is easy. I'm no different to any other woman. I'm no different to any other woman with a demanding role attempting to balance life. Today, I'd hope to inspire you purely by saying that as a working mother, you can do both. Be a mother and a leader. And I'm happy to talk to people or connect to people about leadership opportunities, but today I want to focus on the elephant in the room of babies and that type of stuff and working at the same time. Vulnerability is really important to me, and I pride myself on being real, and I encourage my teams to do the same. Specifically our new staff, we often have lots of conversations in their first few weeks into Hato Hone St John, where we connect together and I make myself available to my team, and we do a round of Ask Me Anything. Quite often my children come up and how do you navigate this? So it's something that although I never intended on initially sharing, you learn to share as you grow in your leadership journey. Really quickly, I'd like to say that I'm extremely lucky. None of this would be possible without the support of my amazing husband and my family. We try different approaches, we change routines as we need to, we look for ways to achieve things, we stay task focused, we look at the to-do list. And who knew that the resilience strategies that we would learn working in the ambulance service would come in handy as a parent as well? Some days all the stars align, and others we operate in survival mode. At the end of the day, there's one thing that I know for sure, and that's what is my why, and taking the time to reflect my cup when I need to. This is my why. These are my children. I'm just going to quickly finish on something a little bit ad hoc, and that is talking a little bit around vulnerability. And I'd like to acknowledge, obviously, the people in the room, but a certain person in particular, Peter Bradley, our CEO for Hato Hone St John, over at the back there. Peter does vulnerability really well, and he is encouraging to all people in our organisation, regardless of whether they're paid or volunteer and or the role that they perform. Each week Peter writes a blog, and I know that in times he's had a few comments about that, but there's something really special about your senior leader, be it male or female, that is vulnerable and still connects with his people by saying we're all human. And so, Peter, I give credit to you for the work that you do in that space. And the last thing I want to say is one leadership tip that I thought of while you've all been talking today, and it's about an analogy that I actually learnt from a psychic, of all things, but it works well, and it's about your suitcase. So thinking about all the things that are hard, all the things that you need to carry, whether that's confidentiality, whether that's stuff that is for a moment and then not to be carried with you. And if you can envisage that analogy of putting those things into the suitcase, rocking up to the train station and leaving it there, it will serve you wonders. Thank you.
Wonderful. Here we go. Hopefully everyone enjoyed that, and thank you so much, Teneale, for last year. That was such a wonderful presentation. It's wonderful to see it back, 9 months, almost 10 months on, and be reminded and sort of reflecting on that. I think it's such an important topic. Like you said, it is the elephant in the room. Being a working parent, and whether you're a mom, dad, and all the challenges and all the joys that it comes with it. Your thoughts, seeing yourself back on stage, on anything that you wanted to add, or just, thinking sort of, and it has been 10 months, so the kids are a bit older. How are you going?
Thank you. We're going really well. Thank you. Children are quite resilient, and children grow and change, and they obviously teach you lots about life and so forth. So, there's a lot to be appreciative of as your children grow and remind you of different bits and pieces. But I think now they're at an age where they kind of understand mum and dad are going to work, and they have important jobs, and they look forward to the school holidays with my parents and my in-laws, and count down the days in that space. So I think on reflection, I touched on it in the video, but it takes a village to raise children and for you all to be successful.
Yeah, definitely. And I always say the mum guilt or the parent guilt, I feel as the kids age, it gets a little bit better. I think when they're really little, when they're babies, and it just breaks you every single day. And then it does start getting a little bit easier. So are you finding that as well?
Yes, I think to some extent, I think the children understand, obviously, that we're at work, but I think there's times where I have to make, or my husband and I have to make critical decisions, prioritizing. Do we watch the cross-country race, or do we do something else, in terms of with our job? So I think it is tricky in that space where, you obviously want to always do the very best for your role, but then equally so for your children. And so I think that's about having good organisation and good communication. And if you can't attend the event with the children because of a incident or, work-related matter, then at least having the honest conversation with your children about why definitely helps in that space. So you learn some better things.
Yeah, there's a great question up here. How we transform as people when we become parents. How did you what did you bring, or part of that you brought to your role?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a really good question. Thanks, Helen. I think probably some of that is around a newfound or a different understanding of empathy and resilience, right? So I think the empathy is understanding that everybody's situations, can be different, and the outcomes can be different, and there can be, different thoughts and feelings, and sometimes they might not be rational, and that's okay. But you learn that from children, right? That children's thoughts, they're innocent. So I think you learn about empathy and, supporting people in difficult times in different ways after you've been a mother or a father, and you've had to navigate, some of the things that children find tough in life, albeit whether or not they fully, completely understand, what it is that they may be upset about or finding hard. I definitely think that children teach you to resilience, and teach you to sort of bounce back and slow down and appreciate different things in life. So I think, that helps transform, particularly when you're working in the ambulance service, to look for the silver linings in difficult times or difficult situations. So I think those things have probably come through, or you have a different understanding of having been a mother transitioning into a senior leader role. But if anything, certainly being a mother of multiples, it really, the biggest thing that served me well was being extremely organised, and I can thank my job for that. So yeah, being organised, and that's how you kind of survive.
Yeah, perfect. You mentioned coming back, obviously from both, and not only that mom guilt, but you're just and like we said, you are a new person, evolved person, whatever you want to call it. What can we do better as organizations to support parents coming back from parental leave? Because it's both genders, really. We're seeing more and more of dads, or when you've got same-sex marriages and partners coming back, and really, what can we as organizations do better? So what are some of the reflections? You've come back twice, and obviously second one with your multiples, with your twins. What would be some of the things that you'd, or maybe you already do with your people when they're coming back?
Really good question. I think probably the biggest thing is working with your staff member to help them prepare, because nothing quite prepares you for, navigating what it is that you're going to do. So I think, I'm not sure if it's the same in Australia, but definitely here in New Zealand, we have things like waiting lists for daycares, as an example. Not all daycares are obviously ambulance service hours friendly. So, I think one of the first things that we can do up front for people is helping them to prepare for that transition, if and when they're ready to make that transition from being at home on their parental leave into the workforce. And so it might be that, we check in and we say, hey, you're scheduled to return in 4 months' time. Have you got all of these things, or thought through all of these things, or got a plan? And how is that going to work? Because the more that you can prepare yourself for the journey as best as you can, the easier the transition can become. If you are a parent of multiples and looking at the daycare journey, the one thing that I remember finding really confronting was that when looking for a suitable facility or daycare for my children was that obviously they have rules and regulations in place. And so that sometimes means there's not two vacancies at the same time. And so that can be really confronting, being told as a parent of twins, we can only take one. Because how do you choose, which child goes and which child doesn't? So I think it's around making sure that, you've got a good support network around you, tips and tricks to help you prepare, being really open and vulnerable and talking through your worries, your thoughts, your feelings, what that transition looks like with your manager. And, for the most part, I think your managers are, they're going to be understanding of that it is a big journey and you've had to reinvent yourself, as you say. And so, there's that part. I think there's a little bit of work to do up front. And then I think it's about when they transition back into their role, is about giving them the extra support or space that actually, as they find and figure out who they are now in this environment, that they have that extra level of support to come and discuss just how you're feeling and what do you need, and being able to really effectively communicate their needs, because they've obviously also, in a role as a parent, gone from you're the decision maker of all and your needs kind of come last, right? And then now you can come back into the workforce and somebody else can lean in and support you a little bit more and, help you work out decisions or make decisions as needed.
Yeah. And I feel as women, and especially then when you become a mom, you are just like, I need to fix everything. This is like, it's on me. It's so personal. Like it's, you need to, like, this is your baby. You need to fix it. So I think, what you're saying is beautiful, because having those conversations, really open-ended ones, in the time before you even come back, and then having that support, because we do feel like we just have to do it all ourselves. I think ambulance throws another spanner in the mix, because you are talking shift work. You are talking, it's a service we deliver 24/7. So I think that's another challenge, and probably another thing that we need to be mindful of with our people coming back. Like you said, daycares, they don't work 24/7. Childcare, even nannies and that. So any tips around that? Any advice you could give us around that, sort of the shift work side of things?
I think it's, when if you're in a situation where you're newly married and you're thinking about the journey of having children, working that out in amongst yourselves. I think the first time my husband and I hadn't kind of worked out exactly what we were going to do. And so that made leaving Presley much harder. And, so having those open, honest, vulnerable conversations as you're thinking about planning your family is, if you're in a role where you're working shift work is important. So that you're clear and do your views align. So whether that's, will you go to daycare? Will one person try and job share? Will they, change their hours of work? What does that look like? I think the earlier the conversation, the better. The other thing I would say is that, we are in a 21st century now, and it is time for, us to accommodate working parents as organisations. And so we can still be everything that we promise to be to the communities, but doing it on shorter shifts and making that available. And so if we've got, parents that are able to work an 8-hour shift instead of a 12, we shouldn't discriminate against that. And we should, as organisations, turn our mind to, what does a flexible working arrangement look like to benefit the business, but equally so support our people who have already given, in most situations, already given to the community, but then to enable them to do both.
Yeah. And we probably won't open the can of worms that is flexible work arrangements, but I think all our services are working on this and trying to navigate it.
That's right.
And I fully agree with what you were just saying. I want to go to Ria's question,
Sure.
because she asked about, how do you transition mums back into comms rooms with regards to requiring lactation breaks? So, how do you go about that as a manager, or how do you support your managers and UD managers to support their teams with that?
Very
Thank
good
you,
question.
Ria.
Yeah, great question. We're quite lucky here in our facility that we have a dedicated room, which is a room where the women are able to lock the door. And I think, within my own leadership team, I think we have kind of, when a person returns to work, again, it comes back to effective communication, enabling them a safe space to say, yes, I need to do these things, pump, etc., or no, I don't. And then for us to just work in with them about how we go about doing that. Now, obviously, in our setting, it's a little bit easier than being on a frontline ambulance. But I know that we manage this well on a frontline ambulance as well, where we just need to kind of have rough ideas around timing or locations and accommodating that, because this is important to a number of people and to the baby and the woman themselves. And I can acknowledge that it's hard to explain. I think we have policies and procedures in place within Hato Hone, and I'm sure many other ambulance services do have that, but to be able to talk through and if need be reference the policy and the procedure, or you're always able to have support people, come and have conversations with you. That's your right if you wish to take a support person with you to discuss something that you find hard to talk through. And I think here in Hato Hone, we have plenty of women that have been in a similar situation, and everybody would be really, supportive of wanting to help one another. And have those conversations. And sometimes somebody that maybe isn't feeling the emotion of that situation can help articulate that really well. So I don't know if that quite answers your question. I'm sorry, Ria, but I think it's a little bit easier for us, I think, versus a frontline paramedic. And I think, this is all about common sense and, doing our very best, applying that model of health of caring for the community to our own people.
I think there's a very, very strong message sent from the organization of having a lactation room that is not a dingy little old closet that, that it's a really beautiful, inviting space and is being cared for and is warm, and that, because that just sends such a strong message to mums coming back going, oh, they do care about me. They do find this as an integral part of who I am and will be for the next year or whatever. So I think even those, and you said having a policy, having conversations that the manager instigates those conversations with the returning mom and goes, look, I know it's, might be a difficult conversation to have also with some moms because they can't breastfeed, but I think being on the front foot and coming from the organization, so it's not on the mom. And there's a follow-up question here about that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you encourage staff to communicate effectively and advocate for themselves? I think for returning moms, and speaking from experience, if somebody had that conversation with me when I came back and said, Muitsa, if you are breastfeeding, this is, the room, please make sure that you feel comfortable taking the breaks and stuff like that, that would just empower me so much. So, I think it's the steps that organizations need to start taking, like you said, to be able to do that. But your thoughts on Miriam's question on how to encourage staff to really speak up for themselves?
Yeah, another great question. I think it's about having, clearly knowing what it is that you want to articulate and to communicate. So my advice to people would be to, map out a bit of a, do good old pen and paper, write down what is it that you're wanting to convey, what's your message that you're wanting to share with your manager, and being, being able to explain what it is that you need, because essentially as managers, it's our responsibility to support our people. And you've touched on that already, that actually we shouldn't be standing waiting in the wings for the staff member to prompt that. It should actually go the other way around, in my personal view. So I think initially it's around making sure that you are clear on what it is that you want to convey, and then utilising your support services that are available to you, if needs be, touching base with, looking at policies and procedures, or reaching out to other mothers or other managers, for those in Hato Hone or Wellington Free, myself as an example, like, hey, how have you navigated this, or what do you feel about this type of situation, and be able to not necessarily sensory check, but get yourself square on what it is that you're wanting to. And then if anything, be brave, have the confidence to speak up. We don't want to, as women, be put in a corner and told you can't talk, or you shouldn't be able to say that. And, the fact that we have situations where that does occur, the only way to break those barriers is to try and push through. But again, I would say taking support people with you, using that, using those support services available within your organisation, whether that's, other people. It doesn't have to be a formal support, right? It could be somebody that understands the process, HR, peer support, whatever that might look like. Hopefully that helps, Meryn.
Perfect. Let me just double check if we've got. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Teneale. This has been wonderful. Really, really appreciate it. And I hope everyone's had a chance to hear that even if you're on maternity leave, you should be applying for that role. If it's the role that you want to go to, that you shouldn't really feel that you need to stop your career if you're having kids or on maternity leave. I think this is really important for us to share these messages and keep on talking. And as we're discussing now, it's about having these really open conversations. And a couple of things I've took away: being really well organized, especially if you're having multiples before you come back. And for managers and organizations to actually prompt these conversations and to not wait for returning parents to ask, but we actually ask there. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Teneale, for joining us today. This was the last of our pre-recorded sessions from our 2024 Women in Leadership Symposium. We will hopefully see you in November in Brisbane for our 2025 Women Leadership Symposium, all of you online, and Teneale as well, hopefully. Huge thank you again to you for sharing that everything is possible, even when you're having kids and maternity leave and all of that stuff. So thank you everyone for attending, and we will hopefully see you very soon at the next CAA webinar or CAA event. Thank you.
Thank you.